parents and students. Thank you for joining me for part two, in which we will focus in on grading and our grading scale. This does warrant some in-depth explanation, although I will try my best not to bore you to tears, because we do operate on what's called the 0 to 5 scale rather than percentages, which is likely different from grading scales that you have encountered in the past. So students will, of course, still receive the traditional A, B, C, D, or F, and on their transcript and everything. Now, it's just the way we go about assigning those letter grades that is likely different from what you've seen before. So, for example, if a student receives a 0 on an assignment, right, it means one of two things. First of all, it could mean they just didn't complete it, in which case I would be getting on their case to do so ASAP. Uh, or it could mean that they did complete an assignment or take a test, but did not show enough learning to demonstrate that they have earned a passing grade, right? Now, likewise, if a student earns a 5, right, it does not mean that they got a perfect paper necessarily or scored 100% or did everything perfectly. What it means is they mastered whatever standard we were assessing at a very high level, such a high level that we feel like that student has earned an A on that assignment. All right. And a 3, right, just simply means that students showed enough learning to receive a B. Now, I'm going to delve into that 3 just a little bit more, just to kind of explain it a little bit. So, if you see that your son or daughter has received a score of a 3 on a paper, right, now that is not to be looked at as a 3 out of 5 possible, right? Um, which would be essentially a 60%, right? We are not working under the percentage model, right? What we've done is we've taken a look at a standard and assessed it in some way. So in which case it could be in the form of a test, it could be in the form of a presentation or a project or an essay, right? We're trying to take that body of information, right, that we've gathered, and we're assessing at what level did this student uh, uh, demonstrate learning, right? And so if they've mastered the bulk of the material and we feel like, you know what, they've met standard and are ready to move on, we're usually going to assign that a 3. Now, if it appears that they've mastered at a higher level, right? So maybe above that kind of baseline standard, a student might receive a 4, right, which would correspond to an A minus, or maybe a 5, which would correspond to an A. All right. So the score of a 3 is not a 3 out of 5 possible. It's just a 3, which corresponds to a B. Now, um, moving forward here, we're going to weight scores based on categories, and I'll kind of show you what this looks like here shortly. But we have our summative category, which is when we expect mastery. So after we've been on a topic or a unit for a while, right? Eventually, we would expect students to have figured it out by then, right? And it's time to measure how well they understand it. Those are those summative assignments. Now, our formative category is maybe what you would consider the process side of things, right? So the classwork, the discussions, the labs, etc., that we have students do and complete to help them learn, right? We do think that that process is important, and so 30% of their overall grade is based on the completion and participation in those processes. And the last category here, which was we were encouraged to use by our building principal, is the professionalism category. And this is simply an assessment of whether they're present and on time, completing work in a timely manner, etc. So some of those universal skills we want students to enter the workforce or college or career with, right? That's that professionalism category. Now, by weighting scores, right, um, in this way, I do want to just quickly compare two students, right? So we're going to kind of take opposite ends of a potential spectrum here. So student A, for example, right, um, did not show up on time or maybe turned in work late, is really highly disorganized, and as a result missed quite a few assignments, right? So they didn't quite fail professionalism and the process, but they barely passed. So they receive a 1 in those two categories. But when it came time for student A to demonstrate what they learned and at what level, they showed a very, very high mastery of that standard. Okay. Now, student B is sort of the opposite. They're your traditional teacher pleaser, right? So Everything's complete. Everything's on time. They're always there and cordial and punctual and participating, right? But in this case, student B showed a very superficial understanding. In fact, just barely enough understanding to warrant a passing grade on that final summative, right? So if I was to do a traditional average, so not weighted at 60, 30, 10, but to weight these three scores evenly, student A would receive a 5 plus 1 plus 1, 7 divided by 3, 2.3 for that student, which would correspond to a C, right? Even though they showed a very high level of mastery of the material. Student B, on the other hand, would receive what looks like a 3.7, which would put them at a B plus overall, even though they showed little mastery at all of the material. Okay, so that would be under a traditional average of weighting summative, formative professionalism equally. Now, under weighted averages, right, if we weight summative at 60, formative at 30, professionalism at 10%, student A would actually receive a B, and student B would receive a C grade, right? Which puts the bulk of that grade and the emphasis on making sure you learn the material for the course. All right, last kind of bits to clean up in terms of grading and what we'll accept and not accept. Assignments are required to be completed by the due date if they want to receive full credit. Now, if they're a little bit late, we will still accept it, right? As long as it is done before the test or project designed to assess their understanding of that material, right? So if there's an assignment on Tuesday, but a test over that assignment on Thursday, they essentially have until Thursday to get that assignment handed in, right? If it's a little after the due date, we might take a point or two off. Not a big deal, right? If we get to that test, though, we're no longer accepting work over the material that that test is about. Uh, Now, opportunities to retake those summative assignments, because they are a large percentage, we will be taking lots of them throughout the course of the year. But because they are such a large percentage, some students are going to want to take advantage of a retake or a revise or a redo. Now, that will be on a case by case basis. And in order to be eligible for a summative retake or revise, they need to score a 5 in the formative and professionalism categories for the material for that. Right. Now, if you have further questions on this, please feel free to email or call.